Hello, good evening, and welcome to Prague Chattery 777. We are, of course, talking about the Mars Volta, and we've made it to this, their third album, released in 2006. This is Amputechture. Funnily enough, it's the only album of theirs that I own on vinyl, which is cool because it's got a fantastic album sleeve. All of their album art is very, very good. This one is particularly creepy and demonic. It's always creeped me out the most, probably just because I've got it on the big vinyl sleeve. So yeah, of course, the Mars Volta itself is the partnership between Omar Rodriguez-Lopez on guitar and band direction and all that, and Cedric Bixler-Zavala, who wrote the lyrics and vocal melodies, and sang, of course. Those songs were then, of course, interpreted by the Mars Volta group, which comprised, of course, of Omar and Cedric, as well as Juan Alderete on bass, John Theodore on drums. This would be his final album playing drums for the Mars Volta. Isaiah Ike Owens, who is the keyboard player, Marcel Rodriguez-Lopez, Omar's brother, on percussion, Adrian Gonzalez, Pablo Gonzalez, and John Frusciante, of course, played a lot of guitar on this album as well, which is quite interesting. I'm not sure what the Gonzalez guys did, to be honest with you. Sorry about that. Anyway. The album itself is certainly a very interesting album. This is obviously coming fresh off the heels of Francis the Mute, as well as their debut album, Deloused in the Comatorium. And obviously both Deloused and Francis are phenomenal records. Both are very highly regarded. I particularly regard Francis the Mute as one of the greatest modern prog albums ever. So I mean, I've said in the last video, I think Francis the Mute is the Mars Volta's big opus. That's their big moment. It is very epic, that album. So this certainly would have been a difficult album to make, one would think. It was done very quickly. It was released only a year and a half after Francis the Mute. But it's very interesting seeing how they follow through the big success, creative success and commercial success that they'd found with the first two albums. Unlike Deloused and Francis, this is not a concept album. Of course, concept album is kind of a loose term with the Mars Volta, because Cedric's lyrics are very cryptic and they're almost hallucinatory. They're very cryptic, and if there is a linear storyline that runs through the Mars Volta's concept albums, it's very difficult to grasp. There's definitely themes there, but anyway, this is not one of those concept albums. Cedric described it as a series of vignettes, and I think really what that means is the individual songs on this album, I think, are a little bit more distinct from one another. Because Deloused and Francis both hold up so well as full albums, obviously the songs do stand out in those, but it's all about the full package. Whereas this, I think, you can pick out individual songs and they hold really well on their own. And there's a lot of highlights on here, man. There really isn't a bad moment on this album. It's still one of those essential Volta albums, I would say. But it may not hold up well cohesively, as well cohesively as the first two albums, and as Bedlam and Goliath afterwards. Yeah, I'd probably consider, probably the first four albums, so Deloused in the Comatorium, Francis the Mute, Amputechture, and Bedlam and Goliath. Those are probably, I would call those the essential albums, and then the last two, Octahedron and Nocturniquet, would be more, they're still very good, less essential, but still very interesting. So this is still in the essential pile. I don't think this album was quite as well loved as the first two albums. When it was first released, I think there's been a reappraisal of it in recent years. It's crazy to think this was released 11 years ago now. That is crazy. I'm not sure if I said that already. I may have. Find out. But yeah, let's try and go through some of these tracks here of this non-linear, definitely not a concept album, but still great progressive moment of an album. I'm not sure how much sense that made. So the album opens with Vicarious Atonement. Very different from how the last two albums have opened. Very long, atmospheric, almost ambient kind of track. It starts with these nice low drones, kind of form a nice little chord progression, and some fantastic soloing by Omar over the top. And then the vocals slowly wash in, and it's very lush and melodic, very haunting. And it gently builds. You get a very nice jazzy influence. There's some nice piano flourishes that come in, and then you almost have a false ending. It kind of reaches that crescendo, and then there's that nice little coda at the very end. That "Don't let these hands sharpen your eyes." That moment is really, really good. We get a lot of saxophone. One of the Gonzalez boys must have been the sax player, because there's a lot of sax on this album, and on Bedlam as well. But yeah, really, really great way to open the album. It shows that they're, right off the bat, they're doing something, different. It doesn't open with the crazy, bombastic, madness that the Volta is so known for. And the first song takes its time. It's a nice, solid 7 or 8 minutes of just, easing your way into the proceedings. That works its way into track 2, which is Tetragrammaton. This is the big epic of the album, and it's really one of the last big epics they really did. After this album, the song lengths did tend to get shorter and shorter. They still did the concept albums, and they still did, lots of interesting stuff, but they didn't expand the songs as long as they did in their, early half of their career. But Tetragrammaton is certainly interesting. It's not. It's one of those songs that it never grabbed me until recently. Again, when I first heard this album, it didn't all quite make sense to me. I'd say, why is it 16 minutes? But the farther away from the release date that it gets, the more I realize it's really, really, really good epic. After Vicarious Atonement, it suddenly bursts in, and there's that classic, bombastic, frantic, punky. Mars Volta craziness that we've all gotten used to, and these dissonant, jangly guitar notes that are ascending, and the bass line is very, doomy and frightening, very Crimson-esque. The big intro to Tetragrammaton, and that's a very long passage, like 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, and we get to the kind of first section of the song, which again has this kind of jangled, arpeggioed line. It starts out quite mellow, and it, works its way up. Some beautiful melodies by Cedric, and finally winds its way into the big riff, the really great riff that I love so much on Tetragrammaton. Really, really classic Mars Volta riff right there, and that really, really always caught my ear. And then that kind of forms a song between the a bit of a fragment of song within the greater piece, between that little weird arpeggiated bit and the great riff. Then there's kind of a weird demented middle section, and then it winds its way into the second kind of song bit of the piece, which is, again, it's got lots of great riff. Not quite as good as that, but really, 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 really cool stuff. And then, like I said, it is kind of 2 distinct songs in the middle of it, and then it's bookended by the heavy kind of crimson-y bit. So then it goes back into the intro after the second bit of song. And yeah, just all in all, really, really good. 16 minutes in total. And it's not quite like some of the stuff on Francis the Mute, where the songs go by a lot faster than you'd think. You read it, say, oh wow, that's like 15 minutes long. Holy smokes! And you listen to it, it feels like 5. Tetragrammaton still feels like a big, piece, and then it's funny. It actually seems, when you listen to it, it seems longer than it is. It seems longer than 16 minutes, but still a great piece. And maybe it had something to do with the big epic being so close to the beginning of the album that I kind of I found weird about it, but still a great piece. Anyway, we go to track 3, or on the vinyl side, we flip the first disc over, and we get Vermicide, which is a really, really great song. Quite simple, I think, actually, for early Volta standards. I guess, dare say it's it's a simpler song on the album. Dare say it's the pop song. Opens nice and mellow, which is good. Nice change of dynamic from the craziness of Tetragrammaton. And it's got, a nice snappy chorus with the burn down, break down, boom, down, na na na. But again, quite simple. The real highlight of Vermicide for me is that bridge section. I love that slowly building bridge section with down 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 down. Really great classic jangly riff, kind of retro. It feel, parts of Vermicide do feel, they've got that 70s influence. Maybe that Zeppelin thing kind of comes out in parts of it. But yeah, great song. Then we wind our way to track 4, which is the almost title track. We get Meccamputechture, or Meccamputechture. I'm not quite too sure how it's pronounced, even though he does say it at the last song of the album. And this is a really good track. Kind of a demented jam in a lot of ways. It's got a really great theme. I like the theme at the start and the end. Bum, ba bum, 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 da da dum. That's just got a great the music part of it almost has that film quality. It's kind of like dramatic film music from like a mobster movie or something like that. It winds its way into a really cool jam, and there's lots of different melodic sections that Cedric sings over. It's not quite like some of the other epics. There's not as many changing sections throughout the song. It does kind of stick to the basic kind of themes. But what's really cool about it, even though it's 11 minutes, it's still it still sticks to the kind of basic themes, like I said. What's really cool about it is that as it goes along, the effects gradually get more and more demented, which is really cool. There's a lot of really cool sections in it where you get the effects on the drums and lots of cool production techniques that were fairly cutting edge even for the time in 2006, which is really cool. And then towards the very end, it really starts to get messed up, and then back to that great dun 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 dun. Goes back to that theme, and it's just fantastic. Lots of great sax playing on Meccamputechture as well. Very jazzy. There's a lot more jazz influence on this album, perhaps, I would argue. Which is really cool. Anyway, then on the record we switch discs. We go to disc 2 on the CD. You just get to listen to track 5, which is how do you pronounce it? Asilos Magdalena, which is a kind of a different thing for the Mars Volta. This is even simpler. It's just even simpler than Vermicide. Simply kind of a Spanish guitar song. Cedric, of course, sings the whole song in Spanish, and it's funny how well accomplished he manages to make it sound. I mean, he manages to sound like a pro Spanish player. He's a crazy rock guitar player, Omar, but does a really good job on that lighter flavor kind of like I said, Spanish folk piece. And again, really nice melodies. I have no idea what the heck Cedric's singing there, but it's a great little moment on the album. Again, changes the tone, helps the album flow very nicely. It's a nice dynamic moment, a rest for the ears after all the craziness. So yeah, it's a great little piece. Then it winds into what might be my favorite song on the album. It's certainly the most famous song on the album. We get Viscera Eyes. Again, simpler than some of the other stuff they've done before. But it's all about that riff. It's that wonderful riff that comes in. It opens with the kind of the electronic drum patches, but then it's such a killer riff, and they just stick to it, and it just the song just marches onward and onward. It's really good. Great bombastic chorus too. Bow bow bow. Get the horn section that it's kind of accentuating all that as well. Really great stuff. Very intense singing from Cedric, as per usual. He's a very intense singer just in general, but he really nails it on Viscera Eyes. I think this was the single on the album. Probably. It's probably, of all the tracks on here, it's probably the most commercially viable. Vermicide maybe as well. But yeah, it's really cool. And that the main riff, that kind of section of the song winds its way into the ending, kind of a coda section, which is kind of goes into that Latin groove thing, that kind of Latin fusion thing that they was always present on their previous albums, which is really cool. I like the beginning, the opening riff section a little bit more, but all in all, really great song. It was one of the concert highlights when I saw them in 2009. I remember that riff in Viscera Eyes was going, and I just remember looking around going, oh yeah, this is an event. So yeah, we're winding our way towards the end of the album. We flip the second disc, or if we're listening to the CD, we get to track 7, which is Day of the Baphomets. I believe this is Flea playing the bass on this track. Very, very great bass playing. The big intro's got wonderful little bass solo, very funky. It's got that nice, chunky rhythm. And then when the kind of main bass line comes in, it's really, really, really cool stuff. Great track. That was always the one that stood out to me, I guess, first when I first got into the album. I was like, oh, Day of the Baphomets, that's the ultimate thing. And it's still one of the highlight tracks on the album. I think I like Viscera Eyes and probably Tetragrammaton more now, actually. I've matured and I've appreciated Tetragrammaton. But yeah, really, really great song. I particularly like towards the end when it goes into the other sections where you get that really, insistent I love the way that John Theodore syncopates that very incessant staccato bit. It's really, really cool. Of course, it winds its way back into the main song section, and that's the big bombastic finale to the album is Day of the Baphomets. But then we get El Ciervo Vulnerado, which is the final track on the album, and it bookends the album really nicely with another slow, atmospheric, almost hypnotic track. It's got that very menacing but mellow bass line. Boom, boom, dong, 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 dong. With lots of menacing lyrics from Cedric and lots of menacing everything, really. But it's kind of a variation on parts of the first track, Vicarious Atonement, but it is kind of its own thing. But like I said, the whole thing about slow, atmospheric, menacing, but mellow and quiet, that is common with both the first and last tracks on the album, which is really, really good. Like I said, it wraps the whole thing up really nicely. And that's it. That is their third album, Amputechture. Like I said, for me, it's probably not. It's not in the same caliber as Deloused or Francis the Nude. Sometimes Deloused, actually. Sometimes I'd probably, I probably listen to this one more than Deloused and the Comatarium because it's interesting and it's different. Like I said, I think the big thing with this album is that the songs are a little bit more distinct from one another. That might be to do with the lack of doing a overarching concept or whatever. But I certainly like it. It's like I said, it's part of the 4 essential Volta albums. So if you are interested in the Mars Volta, you should certainly get it. CD or vinyl. The thing with because their albums are so long, you get tired flipping the album over so many times. But on the whole, it's still a really, really good album, and I would recommend it to anybody who's into modern progressive rock music. And on that note, I will say thank you very much for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all the rest of it. And stay tuned for the next video, which will be on the Bedlam in Goliath, probably their heaviest album. So we'll see you then. You'll see me in the future. Take care.